You have processes going on that are killing you very quickly and effectively. Few people recognize illness as a mechanism of help. It tries to stop you, and you can't accept it. It's unbearable for you. That kind of religion isn't for me. I'll go to someone else. You just have to refuse to listen to it. And so something started stirring in his head. He again acted in a way he shouldn't have, and he sees how his energy starts to shrink. So there's no direct prohibition against breaking the rules. You don't just drop dead, do you? What's more important to me, to keep going, to control things, or to just survive? I'm a novice practitioner. Some things are working out, but mostly not so much. That's how it should be for a novice practitioner. I suffer from type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent, for over 23 years. My main goal is to overcome the illness. It's an absolutely pointless goal. But let me explain. No one has ever managed to do that. Is it even possible, or is it not worth setting such a goal? It's not worth setting such a goal, but it is possible. Why shouldn't you set such a goal? You have mechanisms, you have processes that kill you very quickly and effectively, and you are the initiator of these processes. So you act on the level of physicality, psychology, and energy. Certain actions that kill you very quickly. And so, in order for you not to be able to carry out those actions, to somehow stop you from doing them, and to prevent you from burning out and dying quickly, you have this illness that distracts you, that holds you back, and that keeps you from going insane. If you technically take this illness out of yourself, then there will be nothing between you and your madness. There won't be any more inhibiting processes, and you'll just burn out in just a few weeks. But for you, it's not obvious, and that's understandable, because very few people realize that illness can be a way of survival. Very few people see illness as a mechanism of help. Very few understand that illness saves our lives. It is almost impossible to explain this to a person, because a person who is sick, they'll just refuse to listen to it. He'll say, no, this religion isn't for me, I'll go to someone else. And mostly, he will just keep walking, and 23 years have already passed, and the person is still in this state. So, where should we look at all? What should we pay attention to? What mainly causes diabetes? Because the pancreas gets overloaded. The pancreas energetically reacts to processes related to relationships. And by the way, there's another mechanism. So we have the thyroid and the pancreas. These two areas are quite strongly tied to the relationships between people. If you're inclined to control another person, to manage another person, that is, you don't allow the people close to you to use their freedom. You constantly control them. You always try to manage them. Your positions are very rigid. You're jealous. You get offended. You hate it when a person doesn't do what you want. When a person steps out of control, when someone tries to stop you, you can't accept it. It's unbearable for you. This overloads areas in the body and completely drains your glands. Hello, diabetes. So you need to stop behaving like that. Basically, initially, you need to stop being jealous. Stop getting attached. This applies not only to relationships with a person, it also applies to objects and things, but this is completely exaggerated. So a person, for example, can become attached to something, let's say a car, so much that they react so painfully if that car gets scratched, doesn't start, or if something burns out in it, if they notice something that isn't perfect about it, like a factory issue or a defect. And all of this really hits hard in a person's psyche. They can't accept it very well. They get really upset. There's a crazy dependence on things. And the same goes for diabetes. The same issues with the thyroid will arise. It's unknown what will come out first, but mostly if one thing starts to fail, another will follow. It can start with the thyroid gland, or it can begin with the pancreas. This is the basic causality of such diseases. In other words, your insane desire to control other people comes to a halt. Why? Because another person has free will, because another person is also Mahadev. They are also a part of the original, and they have the right to move according to their own will, not yours. And when you break such rules and orders in this world, your energy system becomes overloaded. It can't handle it. So, there isn't a direct prohibition against breaking the rules. You don't just drop dead, but when you go against the flow, when you go against the rules, you can push against the rules. but it really drains you. It takes away your vitality. It leaves you feeling completely empty. And accordingly, a disease appears that distracts you from excessively controlling the people around you. So you would love to be even more jealous, but your health just won't allow it. So you start to calm down a bit. This is how these mechanisms work. And so when a person realizes this mechanism, when they understand how it all works, this understanding comes to someone who has at least gained basic mastery in a practical energy course. They can observe and feel how energies move through their body, how energies flow in their internal organs, and how energies move in the area of the heart. So he observes them, and something starts to stir in his head. He again acted in a way that he shouldn't have, and he sees how his energy starts to shrink. And in contrast, with this perception, a person might say that what's more important for me is to continue controlling another person. Or will it be to survive after all? And most likely a person will say, no, surviving is more important than controlling another person. Moreover, the other person is usually the closest ones, like children and also husbands and wives. And that's the main reason. By the way, I saw a similar question. Arkady asked me, his sister had her thyroid gland removed. What causes this disease? Develops. What practice can you recommend for such a disease? To love, of course, to love. To love not because everything goes your way, but to love even when everything doesn't go your way. These are also similar questions. Both the thyroid and the pancreas are affected by the same issues. You need to love. They dance around one problem. You need to love, not for something, but because you are alive. Not because you have loved ones, but because you exist and are aware. So you realize that you love, a close person has come into your life, wonderful, your love is unwavering. A close person has left, wonderful, your love is unwavering. It's very hard to accept as a given, it's very hard to understand on a mental level. You need a extrasensory perception. You need to have the skill to see your own energies. When a person sees, when a person feels their energies, just feeling is enough. You don't necessarily have to see them, just feeling is enough. When you feel that you start getting upset about someone else's behavior, and in that moment, you're basically killing yourself. So, obviously, you'll say, I don't want to kill myself. Let them do whatever they want. I want to live. I want to love. That doesn't mean you agree to everything. So externally, you can act however you want. On the outside, you can say, I disagree, or I want this, or I'm not okay with that, or I'm fine with it. But your love, your fire is in your heart. The energy conductivity doesn't change. It doesn't change. It's just like blood circulating through your veins, regardless of your mental state. That's the same energy of your love, your energy of sincerity. Your fire in your heart burns regardless of what's happening around you and regardless of the facade you show. But you, of course, demonstrate it differently now, not in the way you were self-destructing before, but in another way, meaning you still express dissatisfaction. But it's a slightly different kind of dissatisfaction. This is the discontent that's safe, and it's only through extrasensory perception that you can draw the line between dangerous discontent and safe discontent. So the first course is practical energy, the second course is beyond speed, and the third course is the fiery pillar. And practice, practice, practice. Unlock this skill within yourself. We have the skill to walk, we have the skill to see, we have the skill to swim, and there should be a skill to perceive energy. Then everything will become very simple and obvious. Well, then stop it. To manage and control this world, it is what it is. And it's not in our personal power to do anything about it. Let's not whine. But with ourselves, we have enough strength to make things turn out well. Aligning the channels of cosmic energy is dangerous for the human soul. The question is there a siphoning of consciousness and energy from the heart center? Everything, what we focus our attention on, leads to the loss of our consciousness energy. We receive consciousness energy through the soul, through the heart. Right now, I've focused my attention on the equipment that's recording me, and my consciousness flowed into this equipment. Now I've stopped focusing on the equipment and directed my attention to my heart, to my soul. And the action didn't stop, but the consciousness stopped flowing outward. And that consciousness, that stream of consciousness that I just redirected inward, immediately had a strong effect on my body, which made me wait a little for my body to synchronize and align with this flow. So when you direct your attention anywhere to something, that is not you. you lose your own consciousness. It's one thing if it's, say, your child or your life partner, husband, wife, parents. You are constantly exchanging your consciousness with each other. There are no problems with that. And it's a completely different matter. When you send your consciousness into systems that don't even pay attention to you, you're just supplying them with your resources, spending your resources on them. And in return, you get absolutely nothing except for loss and deprivation. How reasonable it is to act this way, but I don't do that. Even when I find myself in some temples that aren't of my tradition, just in some serious temples where I see there's energy, where I see there are practitioners, I don't direct my attention to the deities in those temples. I don't direct my attention to the idols that are in these temples. I don't direct this attention to signs that are in these temples, photographs, portraits, whatever, without directing your attention. I keep my attention focused on what I am. So the physical body, the energy body, and my consciousness. So the body of consciousness is a yantra. And keeping my attention in my field, I look, what energies do I interact with? What can I synchronize with? What energies are known to me? Some perhaps are energies unknown to me, which happens very rarely. I can't even remember the last time I discovered an energy that was unfamiliar to me. But my attention stays within me, and accordingly the consciousness that circulates, that moves, remains within me. At the same time, I continue to perceive the surrounding world. It's a kind of hygienic way of living. So it's a kind of hygiene for your consciousness, for your heart. And of course, if a person starts to pray to something external, to direct your attention to some distant cosmic realms, implying that it's no longer him, that it's some kind of system, some kind of structure, he gives his consciousness away here. There can't be any other options. Even if you just direct your attention to a star in the night sky, one that's 100 million years away, your consciousness will flow there. And if you hold your attention on that star for a long time and are completely relaxed and open, at some point you might physically feel as if you are right there with that star, as if it suddenly came to you. But in reality, it's your consciousness. It reached out and made contact with it. These are really cool moments. And I'll say it. Again, there's nothing catastrophic about this. But there are reasonable limits of such things, and that's already an overreach. If people are fanatical in their beliefs, in their interactions with otherworldly systems, they end up depleting themselves. If a person just a couple of times on a summer starry evening, if a person has approached some star with their perception, yeah, they spent their consciousness on that. So what? There's no problem with that, because new portions, new packages still come to us from our soul, from our heart, and we live off them. That's our viability. The thing is, sometimes you can spend more than what flows into you. That's where very big problems start right away. Well, the word Cosmoenergetics can hide anything under it. Just like an absolutely real energetic process, there can also be some kind of thick egregore that simply parasitizes, and there's no benefit from it. I urge people to study themselves. I urge people to study their energy. I encourage people to study the real world, not the fictional one, and not imposed by someone, but when no one is stopping you from studying it. But then it becomes more or less possible to maintain your vitality. Have plenty of consciousness. Feel your heart burning, and everything is generally good. If a person still tries to find a mediator between their perception and the outside world, it usually doesn't lead to anything good. This doesn't end here. Cosmoenergetics. This is an egregorial system. Is there something in common with your tradition? How does it influence, combine, or replace, or todais, the consequences of its use compared to your teachings? It's interesting to hear what Anton thinks in general about the channel systems of cosmic energy. Petrova, Lazarenko, no, the Russian School of Esotericism by Vladimir Savenkov. Cosmoenergetics is a system of knowledge that I came into contact with at a fairly young age, and most likely what was then called Cosmoenergetics and what is now is present in the vastness of the internet, and most likely these are already different systems. My tradition has roots that go back to the depths of the ages. My tradition emerged a long time ago. Long before that, the term Hinduism even came into existence. My tradition has never been recorded on any information carriers. It has always been passed down in the form of teachings, through individual training, group learning, and the initiation of people. In these teachings and the training of this knowledge, so this wasn't information that was recorded anywhere, and it's not possible to accurately determine from which year we should start counting. Paramparas go back thousands of years in history. Paramparas are lines of knowledge transmission. In the parampara, it is believed that the first knowledge for people, specifically of my tradition, was brought to them by Agastya. Agastya is a rishi, he is eternal. In the scriptures, he is referred to as a sage. And the eternal means that he existed even before the original, before the appearance of Shiva. So, how can this system of knowledge correlate with cosmoenergetics? If cosmoenergetics is based on extrasensory perception, if cosmoenergetics is based on those processes, the energetic processes that are actually happening, which anyone can reach out to and perceive, for anyone who wants to engage with it, who wants to dive into it, then these systems are talking about the same thing. Because the world is the same for everyone. If there is someone in cosmoenergetics, a bearer of abilities, that person does not have the ability to teach those abilities to someone else, then probably that's not about my tradition, not about my system, someone else to these abilities. Then, probably, this is no longer about my tradition, not about my system. Because our main value is that you learn, that you develop yourself, that you achieve the ability to perceive. Reality is multifaceted at all levels. And there, basically, such a scenario isn't considered, where you just sit in the master's field and bombard him with endless questions. Then you end up with people thinking that you know everything, even though, in reality, you can't even verify the accuracy of those answers. For me, it's different. So you train, you develop, you hone your extrasensory abilities, and at some point you just realize, thanks to your skills, that everything is indeed as it is. The aspects that I used to learn about and ask questions about, yes, now I can perceive and confirm that yes, that's absolutely right. It is all like that. Yes, I can choose different words. Yes, I can make the narrative about this modern, but this, about which the narrative becomes modern, it doesn't change. Because reality, it is a fairly ancient process, most likely. Nothing new will come of it. It won't emerge, even though for now it still is expanding. And the schools that were mentioned, the names that were listed in the question, I don't know those people. So I have nothing to say about them. Could you please tell us what the practice of Kundalini offers? You mentioned that the benefits of this practice are well known to everyone, but I didn't get into all of that. Well, there's a lot written on the internet. I don't trust this information, but I trust you. Christina, trust should be in your own psychic abilities. Trust should be in yourself. And this trust shouldn't be empty or ideal. It should be based on the capabilities of perception. The same goes for a person. He trusts his own eyes. If he doesn't trust, he tries to connect with his hands. He starts to trust his tactile sensations. He trusts his taste, his tongue, his hearing. His ears might catch false information, but he has other ways to verify that information and gain knowledge about it. So, I'm glad that there is trust in me, but since we are interacting, implying the knowledge that I carry, so I have to emphasize that the greatest value is not in choosing whom to trust, but in developing that within yourself. In your own capabilities, ultimately practical energy, transcendent speed, a fiery column, these are all ways to develop your psychic abilities and push yourself beyond your current limits. As for Kundalini, Kundalini is a very unique type of energy. This is an energy that manifests at several levels, at the level of the physical body. This energy is known in the area of the sacrum. And it's there, according to some beliefs, like a snake, coiled in rings. On one hand, yes, you can find this process within yourself, but that's not enough for perceiving Kundalini. So these are much more serious movements of energy than just a few rings. At the level of the sacrum, it is perceived as heat, as tingling, a bit of itching at first. then it all turns into some kind of pleasure, into a feeling of high, it's a very similar state to ecstasy. And then, when the movement starts to come, it spreads through the physical body. And at this point, it depends on the state of the physical body. If the physical body is in a broken state, then the released Kundalini energy is more likely to harm that physical body. If the physical body is a more or less good conductor of energy, the body is healthy. Then Kundalini will start to fill all the energy channels, all the energy flows, areas. It will make them very bright, fill them up. What is the essence of this energy? This is the energy that protects us from our usual human foolishness. This is the energy that allows us to preserve our lives when we might unexpectedly lose them. So this is a kind of backup system of the body to prevent us from dying before our time. Before their time, of course. Yes, a person can stubbornly lose their vitality and ultimately perish. And no Kundalini energy will help him because it will completely shut down and fall asleep. But if a person hasn't reached a state of complete loss of vitality yet, if they've just done something foolish, a very dangerous foolishness, a very traumatic foolishness, then the Kundalini energy can help them out of that situation. Naturally, we're not talking about ordinary people right now. For ordinary people, there's a quiet sleepo, a state of oblivion, and there's no movement there. It's a miracle if it somehow manages to break free from there and handle the situation. We're talking more about people who dedicate at least some time to practice, to self-awareness, to development, to evolution. And for such people, it sometimes manifests like superpowers. It is this energy that allows one to break free from stage 4 cancer. This energy allows you to be bitten by a cobra, but not get poisoned by its venom. So this poison will burn out this measure. This energy can give you some extraordinary physical abilities, physical qualities for just a fraction of a second, but that's enough for you to break free from that situation where you are 100% doomed. This energy is a system of protection, of life. Yes, it sometimes manifests not very strongly and helps to deal with some not so dangerous things. Again, I'm talking about a practicing person. This energy should not be confused with sexual energy. It has nothing to do with sexual energy. This is an energy that manifests not only on the physical level, but also on the level of our second attention, on the level of the energetic body. And there, its manifestation is already completely in this vortex that is spinning. It starts in the lower abdomen, in the female body, in the area of the womb, and in the male body, somewhere around the prostate. Give or take. You don't need to sit there with a ruler changing all of that, just inside the abdomen in the lower part. This vortex begins its manifestation, its acceleration, its spinning, its rotation. Moreover, the direction of movement is the same, both clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time, into this whirlpool. Enter the Shakti energies that I talked about in the practices dedicated to the Sri Yantra. This whirlpool contains particles of energy that I refer to as forces, like Adikala, energy and its attention. This whirlpool is located inside the body and it spins around the ray, intention. And from this process, you can achieve tremendous things if you use it, if you develop it, if you train it. If you just listen to this, if you just know about it, it doesn't really define anything in the grand scheme of things. So if we put it in the most primitive everyday language, these energies are just in an extreme situation to save your life. If we talk about something more serious, about the path of practice, it's an integral part of the practice, an essential part of the practitioner's journey. And what the practice extracts from this energy is known only to the practitioner themselves. Because its potential is enormous, I am studying bioenergetics. I encountered the effect that people's biofields can mutually suppress or enhance each other. Well, yes, they definitely can. There is not the slightest doubt about it. Depending on people's birth dates, well, actually, in my tradition, there was a whole huge aspect of knowledge called Jyotish, and there, all of this is taken into account, all of this is calculated, everything is described, and it's a whole science that you could dedicate your entire life to and still not be sure if you know everything about it. Well, yes, it definitely exists depending on the birth date, on which sector of the house a person lives in. This is definitely already with us. In the Asta Shastra, knowledge about housing and the geometry of space is drawn in. All of this definitely exists, yes. Well, it also depends on their psycho-emotional state. Of course, yes. Can you recommend an electronic device that would allow one to quickly track changes in a person's energy state depending on the place they are in? I don't know of such a device. I want to learn how to properly interact with geophysical energies. Actually, when I was working with electronics, when I was dealing with technical devices, well, one way or another, I have faced such tasks and also dedicated some time to exploring possibilities through devices, through transistors, through various sensors, to look for a way to see, feel, and make a device perceive energy fields, bioenergetic fields. There are several directions that potentially allow for registering these processes, but they register them indirectly because at that time, when I was working with electronics, there wasn't a transistor fast enough to synchronize and tune in with bioprocesses to be able to amplify those processes so that the amplified signal could be displayed by that transistor on some screen or dial. So the transistors couldn't find a way to amplify and retransmit those signals for our organs or feelings, that is, for vision, in the form of images, but there were indirect ways to interact with these processes. One of those ways is to place a person in a very high voltage electric field generated by a resonant generator, which is grounded at the point in space where the person is located. This chain of constructions allowed us to illuminate a person's etheric field in the dark, and you could actually see it with your own eyes. But for all that, the madness of this perception, this observation, when you just with your eye, without any training, without any exercises, just turned up the power and the human field shone. With all the beauty of this process, I realized just how incredibly dangerous this device is. So one careless move by a person under such a field, and their life could be cut short because the voltage has to be insane. I didn't come up with these devices myself. Nikola Tesla played around with them in his time. These same effects are caught in some traditions. Shamans, when they search on the slopes of mountains during a thunderstorm, look for places where their fields also start to glow. These effects are known as the Elman lights, or something like that. It just slipped my mind. So they were known even in ancient times, but they were mainly observed on metal objects. During a storm on the ship, technically this effect is known. It can be used to illuminate a person's etheric field. There are ways to build antennas, special sensors, and create them with your own hands that can capture the magnetic fields of our planet. Geomagnetic fields. Our magnetic field is nothing like how it's depicted in textbooks. For example, few people know that the magnetic lines that come out of the Earth can be much stronger than the magnetic lines that are used to position a compass needle. Hello, Anton. Please tell us about mirrors. Reflective surfaces have been used and are still used in various practices by our different cultures. Yes, that's right. They are used because they are very effective for shifting a person's consciousness, for changing their state of mind. That's why they are used. How would you explain their influence on energy? And does it make sense to use mirrors in our practices? Sometimes it happens that a person is in a hurry and they are looking for techniques that speed up his ability to shift his consciousness, that is, to enter an altered state of consciousness. And the vision, the perception of energy is nothing more than an altered state of consciousness, because in our normal state we don't perceive any of this, and mirrors, thanks to their reflective quality, help a person change quickly your own state. And there is no magic in the mirrors themselves. It's just a feature of the material, that is, this reflective effect, the reflective effect, and the refraction of light. From time to time I talk about these methods, how exactly to do this, but the point is that you don't even need to take a mirror. You can, for example, go somewhere in the mountains, find fast running water, a mountain stream, something that isn't even deep, just so the surface shimmers, reflects and sparkles in the sunlight. So we need to have the sun, we need to have a flowing river, and if a person sits by the stream and starts to observe the movement of the water in a relaxed, unfocused way, With these sparkles and this shimmering reflection, literally in just a few minutes, his consciousness can shift so much that he completely loses himself in space and stops perceiving the surrounding reality. He will start to perceive some multidimensionalities, energetic processes, and movements of energies. This is just a mechanism that helps to change consciousness very quickly. But on the other hand, on the other side of the scale, there's the fear that can arise in a person when they encounter all of this. So the faster our consciousness changes, the greater the chances that our psyche will get scared, and the greater the chances that our physical body will get scared. If the body or the psyche or both are afraid, then we become constrained, we tighten up, and we stop this process, changes in consciousness. If a person achieves this through practices, then accordingly the practice doesn't work for them. If a person achieves this in some other way, they don't have the ability to stop the practice, well, his psyche is really suffering, and most likely he won't return to all of this anytime soon. Rapid changes create fear. Fear doesn't allow a person to move forward effectively. So here, everyone decides for themselves whether they will use this technique or not. There are people who, it's only through the exercises that I demonstrate that these effects are achieved. There are people who use additional tools, things like mirrors or shimmering, flowing water, sometimes even just a sunbeam reflected on a shiny surface works, and that might be enough to shift your consciousness as well. But in any case, this is not a panacea. In any case, these are tools, just like mantras, that help in some aspects. And with these tools, whether to use them or not is a decision each person makes for themselves, but there's no magic in the mirrors themselves. It's just a thing. Can you tell me again how to gather your accumulated energy using prayer beads? At what moment is this done, and for what purpose? Where is it applied? And especially after the prayer beads themselves break, after long use, you need to transfer the accumulated energy to other prayer beads. No, it's not necessary. How is energy gathered from the prayer beads? They can be burned. They can be thrown into water. Well, just not in the toilet, not in the sewage, but in water, in a river, in a lake, in the ocean. They can be very, very well, so that the first rain doesn't wash them away, meaning at a certain depth, they can be, you can clean them for a very long time and diligently with rituals and various other methods. Well, the most optimal option is just to burn them. When you do this, while being next to these prayer beads, then your released consciousness will automatically return to you. You don't need to do anything, not even anything special. If you use water, if you use some bodies of water, you'll have to move around a bit more complicated. So this consciousness will spread through the water, and through contact with this water, we can absorb it into ourselves. But there must be a very firm, very clear position. I take what's mine. There's no need for someone else's in it. So what's mine comes back to me, and I send away what someone else's. Here, you'll need to apply some skill. When you bury it, it all goes into the ground. To say that it will return to you, that will require even more skill. And the likelihood that you'll take this energy is even smaller. At least that energy won't reach it anymore. Someone else. Because when you just, for example, throw a prayer bead in the trash, you don't know what that item will come into contact with. It can come into contact with parasites, with processes of decay, with other people who live a completely different lifestyle. And you will feel this because your things are connected to you by an energetic bond. So either you cut that connection and the energy that remains in the object goes out into the space. It's a small problem. Or you burn it and that energy flows into you. Accordingly, there is no longer any connection with that object. Why is this done? Well, in some ways, we are infinite, but in some ways, there is still what is ours and what is not ours. And so, to make sure our very fast doesn't come to an end, we have to take these peculiarities of interaction with objects into account. Well, again, it's to avoid exposing an unnecessary side of vulnerability to the surrounding world. Because any item that has spent some time in contact with us, including clothing and jewelry, is energetically connected to us. And through these connections, we will receive additional influences on top of all the influences we already experience. So we can just create much tougher conditions for our psyche, for perception, for our perception radars. Why do it if you can avoid it? If you can clear your perception radars and direct them towards sensing, for example, your own energy, then you can develop your extrasensory abilities. If the radars are overloaded, you probably won't even want to develop your extrasensory abilities because there will be such an abundance of streams that you'll say, no, I can't see anything at all. That's how it is. The Tantras say that Krishna is the very Kali, which is why he is black and completely paradoxical in his nature. Vaishnavite texts say that Krishna is the original reality from which Shiva emerged. Is Krishna Kali? No, Krishna is not Kali. I'm not trying to dismiss what is written in the Tantras or what the Vaishnavas say. Most likely, Rasul, you have a rather unique understanding of what is written there, or rather you probably read an interpretation of these texts. That is, the positions of other people on this matter. It often happens that when, for example, a translator translates a book, they make a lot of references and add a lot of their own input. I encountered this process when I was reading Bhagavad Gita. There was the main text and then half a page of comments from the author of the book. And so when I read the main text, it was beautiful. I understood everything, and it was a very beautiful piece of work. When I read the author's comments, it was just some kind of fierce nonsense, trash, and complete madness. At the same time, I knew people who told me diametrically opposite things, said how good it was that the author commented, otherwise we would not have understood anything. To which I told them, guys, what you understood doesn't correspond to reality, because the essence is in the text, not in the comments. In the comments, I say it's nonsense. So, Krishna is definitely the avatar of the original. Initially, we have Shiva. One could say that Krishna is the Atman. One could say that Krishna is the one Brahman. These are all just terms. Shiva or Atman. The one Brahman is all the same. It's all the same. This is the ultimate cause of reality. This is the original being that just came into existence. And one of his avatars was Krishna. So for me personally, it doesn't make a fundamental difference who is greeted there, Krishna or Shiva. For me, it's the same thing, but I welcome Shiva because, well, somehow. But that's how it turned out in my perception. That is, I don't even call it by its name. I call Atman, Shiva, these are all non-essential points. But for me personally, it's just like that. Odekolinaos got used to it. From this space, the original emerged, meaning the original came out of it. And the original goes into this space, which is considered eternal. And this space is called Odekalia. Why is it black? Because it is imperceptible. It's not a color black. This highlights the fact that you cannot perceive what it is, because you can only perceive what is manifested, what is Shiva. You are a part of Shiva and you perceive Shiva. When you look at another person, you perceive Shiva, and Shiva is within you and in another person. You perceive Shiva as he perceives himself in that moment. And accordingly, he manifests as a huge iteration of the transformation of the original consciousness into the state of a human, for example. And at the same time, there are his avatars where he exists in his original state. These are multidimensional possibilities in reality. Sooner or later, all of this will converge into a point and return to the original. If we stretch the owl over the globe, we can say that it originally came from the original, which means it can also potentially be original. Yes, you could say that. So then we have to accept the idea that everything here is original, and then we start to have complete misunderstanding and inability to explain. In order not to lose the opportunity to explain to people who still can't perceive this, there are some divisions between the words, unable to perceive this. There are some divisions like that between the words. What we call the original is still a term we reserve for the original chaos from which Shiva emerged and to where he is going. We reserve the term Shiva to denote what has emerged. So, the primal cause, the original source, the original being, pure consciousness, the absolute, you can call it whatever you like. And Krishna as an avatar. This original being, which has already manifested in the physical material world, is also filled, essentially, with beings in which Shiva is present. But these beings are very much limited in their capacity, for perception. So Krishna didn't have these limitations because he is an avatar. But for example, a person has these limitations, even though he is also, roughly speaking, the same Shiva, just in a very, very, very sleepy state, in a very, very limited state. And it's better to read anyway. Texts without comments and without explanations or clarifications. It's best to read texts from the heart, from intuition. They resonate on a completely different level. They don't sound up to par. Sounds, they do not sound at the level of words. They sound at the level of energetic dances that it becomes accessible to a person with an open heart. And these are not just empty words. With an open heart means that there's a fire burning in the heart, flowing with energy. This energy is nothing other than love. Does menstruation affect practice? Yes, it does. If a woman has a healthy body and she doesn't feel any pain, during her cycles, she has the opportunity for a very easy entry into an altered state of consciousness. She has a very easy opportunity to enter multidimensional spaces. So at that moment, between the boundaries between individuality and the external world blur. And people who practice, women who have these cycles, they use them to reach certain areas that are hard to access in ordinary states. However, if the physical body is damaged, if the menstrual cycles are painful, it can be very distracting, and it's hard for a person to practice at that moment. It's just that at that moment they are in pain. It's hard for them. Here the task is to bring your body into order in order to use this moment in time for traveling through multidimensionality. And there's one more thing. Menstrual cycles in an ideal body completely align with lunar cycles. If your cycles are somewhat random in relation to the lunar cycles, then some rhythms within the body are out of sync. If all the rhythms are synchronized and harmonious with the surrounding reality, then the lunar cycles and menstrual cycles occur simultaneously. And of course, all of this can be restored. So this is not a sentence. It's not a reason to be upset. It's a reason to take care of yourself and restore all these processes. Regardless of age, by the way. Everything is one being. God loves everyone. But I just couldn't understand, what about characters like Tikali? So I've come to the conclusion that every person is born with a certain talent. In your terminology, it has some kind of expressed yantra, some part of the yantra. Yeah, that's right. And in his life, he can find something good for her. Application, yes, oh, that's right. But if he doesn't find it, and this energy keeps pushing him to act, then the person starts to suppress himself, and his whole life turns into torture and a struggle with himself. Partly yes, partly that's true. Or if he doesn't want to suppress himself and at the same time doesn't see a creative way to apply it, then this tool starts to be used for destruction and evil, and he becomes a sort of Chikatilo himself. Yes, absolutely right. Yes, that's absolutely right. A discussion, any serial killer could have become a great surgeon. And besides respect, yes, he wouldn't have seen anything else in his life, no problems. But if a person doesn't find such a way to realize themselves, yes, their own, with this manic obsession, he breaks the law. And notice, he is punished by other people, not by God. He is punished by other people. And here is a very interesting point. Everything is one being. God loves everyone. God is everything. And there's absolutely no need to limit him only to the possibilities of love. Yes, God loves. God is in this state. This state is permanent within him. But this is not the only state in which he exists. That's the essence of it. He has a multitude of processes. It contains all processes. I would even say, I wouldn't be afraid to say all processes, including love. Each of us is capable of realizing this, understanding. Well, let's be honest, to understand this, to dive into yet another illusion, to realize this, you need to practice. To love, above all, unconditionally. To love simply because you are alive. To love simply because you breathe. To love simply because you are aware. In this way, we can get closer to the logic of the Creator. Not to the logic of man, but to the logic of the Creator. But there is no understanding there. There is just a state. Moving in this direction of reasoning, we shouldn't forget that in every living being, this is present from the very beginning. That's why, both in Sacrifice to Sa and in the Maniac, these feelings are experienced from the very beginning. Initially, he plays with himself. Just in some states, he is not aware of this, but in some states, it is an obvious reality. If a person, being original, sets the goal of waking up, of reaching the memory of their true nature, then they have a long, long journey ahead. Practices, meditations, mantras, and a multitude of other processes, even playing with mirrors. And this path allows him to wake up, to remember that he is original. But until a person remembers that they are original, until a person, he hasn't experienced it within himself, hasn't manifested all the qualities originally, well, yes, he gets the feeling that there is good and evil, but in reality, there is originally one state and there is originally another state. Here he is, entertaining himself because he can't entertain himself with anyone else. Besides him, there is nothing else here. Here's a question of the same type that Nikita wrote. The question is about the wars that are happening in Palestine right now. Many little children are dying, seemingly completely innocent. The key word is seemingly. But the Creator's design is always just right. Yes, but we can't comprehend his justice. We only have human justice available to us. And human justice in the eighth sense is limited to his physical body. If a person is unable to perceive beyond the physical body, their sense of justice is very limited, and it cannot grasp the original. The Creator's design is always just right. So what is the reason this happens? For an ordinary person, this is incomprehensible. Yes, for the mind, this is incomprehensible, and I completely agree with that. And the mind just can't grasp the fact that the original is present in every little child. And in the person who sets off the bomb, in this direction, the original is present. The original, it generates an infinite number of variations. The original creates the possibilities for realizing really all variations on any theme is in this. It's his game. This is his self-knowledge, since he cannot know the unmanifested. Since he cannot perceive the imperceptible, he can only perceive himself, and there is no one else but him. Even the attempt to say that, well, there is Shiva and there is Shakti, but Shiva and Shakti represent the process of the separation, of the Atman, the original of Ardhanarishvara. So this is the state of Shiva in a united state with Shakti. So here is this creature, can only kill itself, but it cannot kill itself. It can play a game where it destroys itself in one state while being in another. And then all of this, it undergoes multidimensional transformations, and yes, some of its particles completely crystallize and fall into the first gate, and so they remain there forever, eternal, except for some miraculous moments when something lifts them from there. And some of its particles continue to travel, to become aware. And some even remember that, oh, I am the original, and well, okay, yes, now this is obvious, and what am I supposed to do with this now? No, I'll go play another game. And she dives again into some spirals of time, into some Brahman eggs, the eggs of the universe, into some worlds, dimensions, spaces, variations. And all of this starts to spiral until that little particle asks the question, wait, what's the point? Wait, I want to become aware, I want to understand the world, I want to understand God, I want to comprehend God. I will do everything to experience this. And this Kesha is God, and what the hell am I supposed to do now? Well, I'll go play a trick again, and this process of this cycle starts all over again. I've experienced these things, and now I have the ability to talk about them as my own experience. But there was a period in my life when I listened to Ashanas, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But how did you remember that you are the original? And how about this, and everything for some reason is back here again. So it just didn't make sense to me. But when I got through this, when I woke up in this state, realizing that yes, I truly perceive the whole world as myself and my body. And I see through the whole world because this is my body. It was a very brief state. I had to spend a lot of time in intense practices to reach this state. And I couldn't stay in it for long. I fell out of that state. But this experience, my personal experience, allows me to boldly state that yes, originally, he also constantly plays games where he kills himself. But he kills himself on a physical level. Look further, physicists. These energy processes keep flowing. One stream of these physical bodies can have 1 million, and some part of these physical bodies is dying right now. And some physical bodies start to appear again. It's like bunches of grapes on the vine. Yes, there are moments when there are no grapes. There are moments when it is completely covered with grapes. In reality, there are streams that have physical bodies. There are streams that do not have physical bodies. There are physical bodies that reach a state of pure energy and travel through the flow, traveling through reality. There are a huge number of variations. But if a person has fallen, stubbornly, he sees nothing beyond physics. He cannot understand what the logic is here. He can't understand why this is happening, because he can't see a damn thing. He only looks at a piece of meat, and that's it. And in order to look beyond the piece of meat, actual energy work, second course, third course, and let's go, I moved like this. These practices allowed me to realize and see all of this. Then I asked myself a question. All right, I have the ability to regain the memory of being original. All right, remembering that I'm original, I clearly realized what I should do in that state. Well, it's really great, magnificent, and fun, but it's actually not fun at all. It's very boring. You realize your loneliness, and you can't shake it off in any way because it's a fact. This is how he escapes into some kind of, I don't know, alcoholic haze, trying to shield himself from the events in a person's life, also initially trying to slip away from his loneliness in these endless games of various variations. After all, there are games where children grow up into wonderful young people, everything is great for them, and they make discoveries. Why isn't this taken into account? And this also has its place. In beautiful girls who have wonderful children, everything is great, everything is magnificent. This all happens on our planet. Yes, there are children who end up in other games who are physically destroyed by explosions, bombs, all of that. But on our planet, there have always been warriors, always. And there have always been those who died in these wars. And there have always been those who ended these wars and started new ones. Fighting is an inherent scenario of existence on this planet. There it is. And the original is present in every person, and who shoots and who dies. And all of this happens on a material level. A bullet, it can't kill your soul. Just not at all. This is worth considering. Why do you pay so little attention to the topic that the self is an illusion and that we need to disidentify from it? Because I don't need it. Yeah, I found myself in a state where you are originally, well, or great, wonderful, fun. Then you start to wonder, what should I do next in this state? And you just dive into another scenario, or you go back to the scenario you were just in. You just struggled in every way, broke free from that scenario, realized the reality of what was happening, and thought, damn, it wasn't so bad in that scenario, actually. And you go back into that scenario, and you need a personality, because only the personality will tell you, I want, I strive, and I need this. If you don't have this personality, how are you even going to move forward? You won't even want to feed your body if you don't have a personality. So basically, my goal isn't to get rid of the ego. I'm willing to agree that there is a false ego. There is an alien consciousness that controls some of our emotional reactions, and that's a separate topic for discussion. But from my own ego, from the one that allows me to want, that allows me to strive for something, that lets me come up with tasks and goals, achieve them, and enjoy it, why should I get rid of it? Absolutely not. So I don't have that goal. And I fully realize that no matter how much I entertain myself here, no matter how much I indulge my personality, the Mahapralaya will come. And all personalities will be destroyed at once. Only the original will remain. Why do I need it? Do that, put in the effort when it will happen on its own? For me, this is an obvious fact. I have no doubt that there will be a Mahapralaya and all personalities will be destroyed. Why should I run ahead of the train and destroy my personality? If someone has found meaning in that for themselves, well, let them destroy their personality. I don't mind. I don't interfere with other people living. To reach a pure perception at the level of the psyche through your attention, where the barriers of the mind are erased. Yes, you can do all of this. Well, you step into that state and you realize yourself that, yes, I exist, that's it. Then you'll be doing something in this. I'm not tempted by that. I don't have the task of staying in clarity, in this position, in the memory of what is original. I drew it for myself. The goal is beyond the original. It's madness. It's madness no matter how you look at it. But when I looked in that direction, it suddenly became clear that it turns out there are beings who have already realized this. So I thought, wow, I'm so unique, right? I want to be from the original. Everyone is still trying to connect with him, but I've already realized that I'm already connected to him. I'm already with him, like a needle with a thread. Where else is there to connect? I want to step outside of its limits, and then, after some time, already within my tradition, within the knowledge I had gained, it suddenly became clear that, it turns out, this has already been done. And this was not done by me, it was done by other beings, and other beings shared how this is done. I now have this knowledge. I manage this knowledge. I use this knowledge. But in order to use this knowledge, I need to have a personality. There has to be someone who wanted this. Right, wrong. I don't even ask myself that question. I have a goal to become free and to break free from influence, Mahapralaya, to experience Maha as a personality. I understand that someone will say everything is clear with him. But I also understand that there are people who have already told me, I want that too. I say, well, let's practice, and we practice. So let's fight against our personality. Max, I'll say it, everything will happen automatically. There's no need to rush. When you practice energy, you direct your attention to the body. Yes, but not just to the body. That's in some of the practices. I direct my attention to the body. But when a person returns to their normal state, they get caught up in the ego state again. So your ego is what makes you practice. You see, there's actually a very tricky system here. If a person strives to perceive something, it will be incredibly difficult for them to perceive this, especially if we're talking about energy right now. In order to perceive reality we got illusions. To perceive reality as a whole, you need to stop perceiving. What I'm saying right now is absolutely illogical. It's absolutely not intuitive. It's counterintuitive. But that's exactly how ascetic practices work. You stop, breathing. You stop eating. You stop moving. You stop looking. You stop smelling. You stop speaking. So you stop all the functions that give you perception of the surrounding reality. You stop them, and then at some point, suddenly, this inner something is released, and you see the world beyond matter. You see the world as it truly is. And you see your nature. This is your original nature. And it's like, oh, hello, here we are. And then you return to your senses again, perceiving the world, but in a flawed way. You might want to experience that state again. I am everything. But then your ego kicks in saying, I want to experience that state. So you see, we're just going to slide into some kind of demagoguery here. In the end, even though I'm not communicating with you directly, I'm just answering your question. But I've already gone through all these paths a long time ago. And now, when I read about the need to fight against your personality, who needs to fight? If you need to fight against your personality, it means you already have a personality because you need something. And when you are original, yeah, there's no ego because you perceive everything all at once. What kind of ego can there be? Well, there you also perceive that you're absolutely alone, and there is no meaning in anything at all. And that's a pretty unpleasant realization, let's say. You want to hide from it in endless games and scenarios. In general, many masters spend a lot of time on this topic. In the same Hinduism, it's about the dissolution of personality, ego, and so on. Sure, let them spend time on it. I'm not even against it. This is also one of the ways to understand reality, when you push away everything you can, and in the end, you open up the possibility to experience the state of being original, to remember who you really are. That works too. But when that has already worked, try to find the meaning of your existence further. It won't be that simple anymore. Yes, and we will be honest. And people who preach about the absence of ego, how do they even start doing that? What drives them to preach about the absence of ego? The ego drives them to do that. So I haven't been moving in that direction. For a long time, I've acknowledged my ego. I'm enjoying life. I'm having fun, and I'm setting goals for myself. I achieve these goals. There are strategic goals, the goal of my entire life. There are tactical goals that are fulfilled over time. And all of this makes me a happy person. All this makes me a person who... I'm grateful to reality for such a possible form of existence, which has the audacity to set a task for oneself, to go beyond everything that is manifested. To go beyond the influence of the process called Mahalaya. What kind of ego must one have to set such tasks for themselves? Can meditations for freeing oneself from the influence of the ego be done while lying down? I feel that way more. Yes, no problem at all. Of course you can. The main thing is not to fall asleep, otherwise it will turn out that time was wasted and there will be no results. Sure. And if you feel like you're falling asleep, you can open your eyes. And having your eyes open, even while lying down, won't let you fall asleep. You can do all of this. In his interviews, Anton often says that you need to periodically satisfy your passions. Absolutely, of course, you have to. I'm ready to repeat it even now. Many times. Of course, you have to. What do you mean by the word passions? Normal, human needs. Or could they really be destructive dependencies for a person as considered in Christianity? Passions, by this word, that which brings you pleasure, what you like, what makes you feel good and pleasant, what you enjoy, what you get a kick out of. Yes, you can definitely go overboard with this. If a person goes overboard with this and forgets about their soul, he is stopped by illness and brought back to his soul. But if a person doesn't go overboard with this, they're just happy, they're enjoying themselves, and they have a soul in order and his needs are met. Passions are a general term for everything that brings us pleasure. Someone might happily spend half their life painting a picture, but if you distract a person who is painting and ready to spend half their life on it, they will be burning inside, and they'll say, yes, of course, whatever you want. So he won't freak out, which means everything is fine with him, he's doing well. If a person is pathologically dependent on the painting, any attempt to distract them immediately leads to a scandal. And to hysteria, he will get sick, he will break down. Passion can be sex, passion can be food, passion can be walks in the fresh air, travel, tourism, clothing, creating shapes, sculpture, creativity, the music. Passion can be anything. It's what brings you pleasure in this life. And this is something we definitely need to do, absolutely. Without this, we won't break free from here. Our piece of consciousness will not be separated from this reality if we still want something from it. And so, when a person allows himself, realize your brightest passions, then find the less obvious hidden passions. Sometimes a person discovers in his life that having satisfied some passions, others appear that were never his passions, that would never have been characteristic of him. For example, I can say from my own experience that at one point, solitude, seclusion, and not being distracted by other people was normal for me. I enjoyed spending time like that. I felt good and comfortable. But after many, many years, on the contrary, I want to have someone by my side. The one who helped me create a cozy atmosphere, the one who helped me relax, develop, and calm down, who took on the responsibility for organizing the space, for the organization, that I no longer have time for. So, intensity in life reveals certain needs in me that weren't there before. And that's okay, and I'm closing it off. These needs, I make sure that there is a person next to me who also enjoys performing another function with me. So, I take on the role of, let's say, the provider, while the person takes on the role of organizing what has been provided, and we are both satisfied. Yes, there are people who do not want to organize, who want to extract, and no one forces them to play other roles. I'm talking about how these inner needs change, and only by satisfying these needs, only by allowing ourselves to burn through these passions and enjoy them, can we truly be ourselves. But in reality, we don't enjoy our passions for very long if we allow ourselves to do so. And in this process, we don't lose harmony and balance with one's soul. That's when everything happens. That is when a person is infinitely happy that he is alive, and then a person does not cut off, does not cut short his life at death. Then they continue to live on, even outside of the physical body. If your passions consume you, if you fight against them, if you forbid yourself, then most likely at the time of death, your life will completely come to an end. So you will lose the ability to perceive. I recently found out about the pregnancy. Here's a question. From the perspective of extrasensory perception, how does pregnancy look? Understanding that the soul doesn't come to us directly, but as a part of the consciousness of the future child, it's connected to their forming body from the moment of conception. She is in the body, where she stays throughout the entire pregnancy. Is it safe to practice the gates? And has it become more difficult to practice? Is it due to adaptation, or is it due to the strengthening of materialization? It's due to the redistribution of resources in a different way. We practice by using resources, we spend resources to practice. When a person starts to create new life, naturally, their resources go into creating that life. It's the same as, for example, orgasm. When a person experiences orgasm, the resources go into pleasure. And after the orgasm, well, it's not so easy to achieve the same results the next day as it was on other days, but it's definitely achievable. It's all about the distribution of resources. From the perspective of extrasensory perception, how does pregnancy look in a person? Starts to spiral. Energy density, a kind of localized movement of energy, like a vortex that starts to gain volume. Acquire some kind of multidimensionality of movements and complexities. It starts to become more complex. Here, in the text, it talks about the soul. No, the soul doesn't descend here. The soul is not here. It doesn't exist at the level of the physical body. The soul connects. She just plugged in her plug like this. And this plug is actually a part of consciousness that comes here. Again, I say that it comes in different ways. Sometimes this part of consciousness is already present around the future parents. It's swirling around them, getting them ready to create a physical body. It's already prepared to jump into all of this. Sometimes the part of consciousness enters at the moment the sperm fertilizes the egg, that is at the moment of conception. At that moment, the part of consciousness dives in and begins its material life. How it happens in a specific case, I currently don't have the ability to grasp this process, but I know from other women that they were very clearly aware of this moment of entry. Yes, they could have missed it because it was new to them. They didn't know what it meant. But when they recalled the previous days, the moment, for example, of the sexual act afterwards, that is when they replayed in their minds what they felt, what they dreamed, how they felt about themselves. They were like, so that's what it was. So they felt this entry into a new life inside themselves. It's very hard to miss, but you don't always realize what happened. You can perceive this as something else, meaning you might get it mixed up. But mostly, women feel very clearly that life has begun to grow inside them. So, if you just get into a relaxed state of mind, replaying these events, review them, I guarantee you'll find that moment when everything happened. The soul doesn't come to us directly by mind, right? But yes, a part of consciousness is definitely connected to the soul, and a particle of consciousness clearly realizes that it comes to the person who practices. It clearly creates the understanding that this person will open the gates, activate the energy channels. So this part of consciousness is like, oh, I belong here. And right now there's no need to overthink it. No need to come up with a different way of life. Why? You were chosen just as you are. Well, if you can't accept yourself, at least trust that part of your consciousness that chose you. Try to move more from your heart, from your soul, from the feelings at the soul level, rather than from the constructs that are born in your mind. Sometimes our minds are such a mess that nothing useful, no meaningful constructs can really be born there. She starts her material way of life the moment she becomes pregnant. So, for example, when in our Western culture the child's account starts from the moment of birth, that's not correct. In Thailand, for example, the child's account started from the moment of conception. A person was already born. They were 9 months into their life. And this is more in line with reality. This is more correct, more true from the point of view. Energy. So everything, life has already begun. Already this tiny part begins to experience its material journeys. She already has certain character traits and certain ways of reacting. She's already starting to tie her tiny karmic knots that will determine her future life, her destiny. That's it. The process has already begun. Well, regarding the fact that it's become harder to practice, well, the resources have shifted to other things.
Do you want to unlock your inner strength and learn to manage energy? The course, Power of Consciousness 1. Practical energy will provide you with tools to improve health, develop intuition, and gain a deeper understanding of the world. Join and start changing your life right now. Link in the description.